Yo, yo, it's the Direct Response Podcast. I'm your host, Travis Ketchum, founder of Campaign Refinery, joined as always by David Cartolano. How's it going, man? Thanks for being here.
Hey, it's all good, man.
Cool. So, today we're hitting on a topic that I actually should give more credit to, and therefore I should do it more often, which is surveying via email to extract useful information about your audience to guide future educated decisions on what you do, what you offer, what you teach, and what you sell. So, David, I know you've managed a handful of lists over the years, probably more than a handful. I'm sure I'm selling it short. But if you've done surveys, when you're trying to formulate a survey, what are some of the core components, both from a strategy and a tech stack perspective, do you try to keep in mind when you're putting one of these together?
Absolutely. So, given we were talking before this podcast, and I reflected back on working with clients, and I thought, I should have surveyed more looking back on things because customers, when they complain, at the very least, they're giving you an honest opinion. And a lot of the problems in business can be solved by listening to the customer. So the first thing we go into when I did do surveys for people is why? Like, why are we asking this? Are we just collecting data for the sake of collecting data? That's boring. And it is an audience ask. We are telling people, hey, take time out of your day to do this. Okay, so we do want to be strategic in why. But one of the things that I've done in the past was do a survey for a Black Friday project where it's like, okay, let's throw together a bunch of info products for a Black Friday product. And rather than just us make it up ourselves, well, why don't we survey the audience and see what they want, what they are looking for? So there's a bunch of different ways that you're like, okay, David, that's great. Like, what kinds of questions do you ask? Well, I would ask questions, and Travis, you could chime in at any time if you have some like really cool questions. But I ask questions like, what have you spent money on before? What problems are you dealing with in your business? How have you tried to solve them in the past? What type of solution did you purchase? Was it a course? Was it a book? Was it uh, uh, like a small email series? And what was the price point that you paid for it? So simple questions like that. You never want to make a survey way too long. If anything, like it should be like a 2-3 minute thing. Any longer than that, and I would pay them for their answers, and I truly mean that. So those are some questions that I asked. Travis, are there any questions that you like to use?
Yeah, so I like to, it's not that I have like a magic question to ask per se, but I have a way that I like to frame it that will put me in a position because first of all, you're right. It's definitely an ask. I think asking them to do a survey is the same as asking to buy something. You're asking them to
Yeah,
exchange value. And in this case, you're asking for the most valuable thing that they have, which is their time. Okay. Even if
right.
it's 30 seconds, a minute, 2 minutes, whatever, right? You're asking them to care enough about you, your brand, what you have to offer, what problem you can solve for them, that their voice is useful, valuable, going to be heard, and worth their effort to do. So let's just set that as the baseline. The second component is for getting any of those responses, you're going to have both signal that is useful and you're going to have noise. So I like to think, okay, what are the most important questions I have to ask? And then what little sort of sneaky question can I put in there that will help me then lump, is this data set from this individual user signal or noise? So for example, in my first software as a service, when I transitioned from having a WordPress plugin version of it and I was building it as a SaaS, um, we got the MVP out, we sold a couple copies, and I had these thousands of customers that had bought the WordPress version, which was fairly simple, but really good at what it did. And I was trying to build this software as a service and, sort of blue sky, what can we build? What can we do? What integrations should we prioritize, right? Like, how do we get people to care about the new version that we're building so that they feel involved with it, but also that we're focusing on the right ones first, not just the most popular answers first, because those aren't
Mm,
always the same thing. So here's how we situated that survey. For an example, we asked, of these features, stack rank which ones you want. But then we said, okay, what integration do you want to see us add? And we listed a whole bunch of email service providers, and we even added a box for other. And then we asked, price point question, sure. But the key question at the end was, if we did everything you asked and we shipped it tomorrow, on a scale of 1 to 10, what is your willingness to buy?
Mm,
And it may sound dumb and you may think, well, that's not going to tell you anything. But what was really fascinating is you picture those old like word clouds, where like you see words get bigger the more popular they are. We saw very quickly that there was really two groups of answers. There was a lot of group of answers that wanted all the features and they wanted certain ESPs, but their willingness to buy was almost zero. And the price point they told us they were willing to pay, if they were even willing to pay, was below what we would ever reasonably charge. Right? They want to pay like $10 one time, and even that you'd have to beg and plead. And like, okay, so people of these providers, which are all kind of answering the same, all have a low price point they're willing to pay, and their willingness to pay is effectively zero. I no longer care about those features of those integrations. They are at the bottom of my list. Conversely, the 10 to 15% of the respondents that said a very different ESP and asked for very different features had a much more reasonable price they were willing to pay, and their willingness to buy, if we added it right now, was a 9 or a 10. So now, even though I had this huge
interesting.
data set of answers, I knew that I could throw out 90% of those and focus on the integrations and the features that people who were willing to pay and they were willing to pay yesterday. That guided our entire product decision in the early days, because in the early days where you're spending money on software can make or break you, right? Because you're
Mm.
you're spending what little limited capital you have, what limited time and attention you have, and you have to focus. And so I think by having those qualifying questions, how much are you willing to pay and what is your willingness to pay if we did everything perfect what you asked for, really allowed us to focus on the things that allowed that business to thrive. Now, the questions you were outlining are also valuable, but in a different way, right? Because what you were
Yeah.
outlining has to do really with what are your interests? What are you looking for, right? And I think that that can guide new product development. But even with that, you could say, if we created a program that was based around your answers, right? What would you pay if it got you the outcome? What was your willingness to pay? How quickly would you be willing to buy? I think the same type of stuff can be applied even to a survey that is primarily focused on interests for guiding, because I think you will see very quickly a separation of the data between, hey, I got a lot of answers that are like this, and without the qualifiers of how much and willingness, I might focus on that. But as soon as I see how much and willingness, I might actually want to focus on the 10% of my list that does want to buy from me because it gets them the outcome and they're willing to buy it yesterday at a high price. It can be hidden in the data there. So I think that asking those kind of questions is pretty big.
I'd love that question. That's pretty brilliant. I think a lot of email marketers, especially, and you see this in the newsletter space with a lot of these like new Beehive newsletters, where they will put a Beehive Substack, the whole craze that's going on. People will put at the bottom of the newsletter and they'll say, hey, tell us what you thought about the newsletter. 5 stars, loved it. 3 stars, meh, it was okay. 1 star, it was bad. And I look at that and I'm like, how is that? How is that good data? How? All you got is, yes, this is good. No, this is not good. And then now you have to guess, right? So the importance of asking questions and making sure they're like high impact questions that actually give you a decision that you can make as a newsletter owner, as a company owner, is really important. So I take my surveys very seriously and I don't just want to throw things out. So if anything, listen to this podcast again and like write down those questions because I actually really liked those. Uh, as far as you saying right now, David, Travis, okay, cool. I have the questions. How do I actually do this if I'm sending out an email? So there's a multitude of ways to do it. I like if you have one question to ask your audience, just one. I don't even like using a form. I like sending out an email with a multiple choice that says, A, B, C, D, right? We obviously have the question. We want to say why we're asking the question. That's something that's really important. You don't just ask people for stuff. You ask them and let them know why you're asking them for something.
And make sure
There's
your question also, just by the way, isn't something that might be like a security question.
oh
like, like don't ask what house did you grow up in? What was the first make of your first like,
yeah,
don't be weird and creepy about it. Like
yeah, you
have
you might get hella flagged for that. So yeah, don't do that.
yeah.
But yeah, give yourself like a normal question that's not going to get you flagged at from Google. Tell them why, and you could even tell them why at the bottom. It doesn't matter, but you do have to tell them why. And then what I like to do is I like to create uh four, like they could be four small websites, four small funnel pages, whatever it is, and I will have a hyperlink to the first answer. I will have a hyperlink to the second answer, hyperlink to the third, hyperlink to the fourth. And what I'll do is I will tag somebody, and email service providers, the good ones have this ability where you can tag somebody based on what link they clicked. So if I'm giving people a multiple choice question, I can take a look at the tags of whoever answered letter A, whoever answered letter B, letter C, letter D, and I can take a look at that after the email. And the reason I like doing this for a one email survey is because it reduces friction. Because if you have to get people to click and then go on a form, you're going to get less responses. You just are. So if you have just one question that you want to hit your audience with, that is like my go-to way of doing it. If you do have more questions to ask your audience, heck, I mean, I'm pretty janky guy. And that sounds weird, but I'm pretty simple. So I will use Google Forms, make it a simple multiple choice survey, and that's it. People want to fill in an other section, I leave it open to them, but I keep things multiple choice. People don't want to write paragraphs in their spare time. All right, we got that burned out of us in seventh grade English. So I like to make it very simple in Google Forms. I know you can use softwares like Typeform. Typeform's fantastic. You can use SurveyMonkey. You can use a janky thing you found on AppSumo if you want. Wherever you want to take and put your answers, that's up to you. Preferably get something that's simple and doesn't cost too much unless you're dealing with high volume. So if you're anticipating hundreds and hundreds of responses, maybe Google Forms isn't the best option for you. You might want to go for a more premium solution. But at the end of the day, give them a link to a website with the ability for them to answer questions, and you want to make sure that it looks good on mobile. If it doesn't look good on mobile, you're kind of screwed because most people read emails on mobile. And that's just by the numbers. That's not even me making that up. That's just a fact. So
Most people
make
do
sure that the
everything on
subway,
mobile, if we're being honest.
yeah, for real. So make sure that this, I said subway. Make sure the survey itself can fit on mobile. Because if a subway can fit on mobile, then your phone is crazy long. So yeah, those are my tips. I try not to make it harder than it needs to be. Just really think of the user at the other end. Are you going to give them a 3-minute long question to read? Maybe not. All right, people are busy. People have things to do. People have dogs that snore and take up their attention. They have kids banging on their office door. Make it simple, make it fast. They should be able to fill it out while they're on the toilet. That's my rule of thumb.
Yeah, and I think that the one question email is also really good. It obviously makes it hard to get some of the signal noise stuff I was talking about. But if you have it pretty well narrowed down, for instance, you're trying to make a new info product, right? A new training of some
Yeah.
kind. You're like basically, hey, here's 4 different directions I could go, and you use the tag method. Even if someone clicks more than one, that's okay because they're interested in more than one thing. And so you could say, okay, this is the most popular thing that I could build. I'll build that first. But then when I built the second thing, if they have the second tag and I launch that next quarter instead of this quarter, I can still tell them about it. They're still tagged right. They did click the thing that was related to that product. So I think that also forces you as the creator to be concise and be brief, which takes
Mm-hmm.
more skill. But that is the thing that is most respectful of your audience's time, most useful in terms of data that you get out, because it becomes very binary about what the leading product is. So I think that that's a great way. And again, I'm a big fan of anything that can be implemented today. And I think that this is one of those that can be rapidly done. And as far as the Google Forms, big fan. I know that they, I actually think that Google is far from being the best designers out there. They do not make stuff that is pretty, but they make stuff that works, and people generally
Mhm.
trust Google products as well. I think one of the prettiest is probably Typeform, but we all probably have a Gmail, and a lot of us probably have, a professional Google workspace kind of thing that can aggregate that data into a Google Doc and let us make fancy charts if we feel like about, answers to visualize the answers of popularity and that kind of stuff. So I think it's a great place for 90% of people. Just use
Yeah.
Google Forms, distill your questions down. If you can make it less than 10, good. If you make it less than 5, that's better. Simple, 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 and get the
Mhm.
data out. And then to complete the loop, be respectful of their time by doing something with the data. Don't just look at it and say, okay, great. I know this is information I know now. Like, okay, well, what are you going to do with it? How are you going to make that a more valuable experience? So the next time you ask, they're not like, oh, God, that was such a waste of time. It was,
Right.
okay, I answered that and they launched a product, or they added integrations and then I heard about follow up or whatever. Like you show that you took that data and did something useful with it, which is the
Mhm.
the respectful thing to do. So you're not wasting everybody's time.
And one tip that I forgot to mention is reciprocate. It doesn't take much to set up. If somebody submits a form via Google Forms, you can set up a Zap or a Make, or if you want to write your own custom webhook, go for it. But you can set up a simple Zap that goes back to your email service provider and sends them an email with a free gift, like, to incentivize them to actually take their time. Um, you're now trading time for something else. So that's something that you can do, and that's not going to take too long. And another tip that might swing you toward Google Forms: Google tends to favor their own links when you send them out. So sending out a Google form link compared to a SurveyMonkey or Typeform, if you're struggling with deliverability, the Google link might be better for you. But if you're using a great email service provider and you're following best deliverability practices, you can pretty much choose any link, and you'll be good.
Yeah, my rule of thought there is it never hurts to kiss the ring when it comes to
Very
the
good.
majors,
Very
right?
good.
So it's why, if you're going to embed video into a blog post that you want to rank on Google, probably good that it's a YouTube video, right? So this is this applies across the board. Facebook likes links back to Facebook stuff. This is always true. I like to say, kiss the ring, and you tend to be better off when it comes to the digital algorithms. All
Yep.
right, Dave. Well, I
Yep.
think that was really useful. Hopefully, people have some ideas about how to technically and strategically go implement a survey that can hopefully guide them on building the next thing, whether it's an info product or making the next offer or improving their software or whatever it is that you do, whatever makes your product or service interesting. Hopefully, you can use a survey to not only make it more interesting, but also get some hand raisers in the process, people that are actually interested if you did just a little bit more. And sometimes you may be surprised, if you put a feature in there that you already have, but people aren't aware of it. They might answer that and say their willingness to pay is high. And that would just be hey, maybe we need to reincorporate this in our marketing more, even though we've already done it. So definitely a good little tip to sneak some of those in there as well.
Interesting. I like that. I like that. That's really cool.
Cool. All right. Well, as always, we've got a blog post down below if you want some more inspiration, ideas, tech stack, yada, yada. Got the blog post for you down there if you're looking to dig a little deeper and go past the appetizer into the main course. And if you want to use a good email service provider to launch this email survey, Campaign Refinery would love to talk to you to see if we're a good fit. And David, give them the good word.
Yeah, if you are building a newsletter and you don't want to put mediocre surveys at the bottom of it, you can go to wealthyinbox.news, where I'm documenting my journey on starting a newsletter and growing it and selling it for a lot of moolah, and all the tips and tricks I'm learning along the way. So you can go to wealthyinbox.news and check out the blog on that.
Yeah, if you want to run a newsletter that's more than just the gladiator thumbs up, thumbs down at the bottom,
Oh my God. Oh my God. Don't
that
get me started, Travis. Oh.
wealthyinbox.news, my man. All right. Till next time, you guys. Catch you later.